What's happening, fishing friends? Welcome to another episode. The ice is melting here, and I'm going to have some open water fishing very soon. And one question I've been getting a ton from people around, what are some of your favorite early spring lures to throw? So today we're going to talk about that. So today I want to share my top 4 lures for early spring fishing. I'm going to share some of my favorite types and brands of lures. I'll give you a few tips for where and how I fish each lure. And finally, I'll go over each lure's rod and reel setup that I use. So enough yapping, let's get started. Well, if you've been around the channel any amount of time, it's probably not a big surprise that lure number 1, yes, I am always going to have a Ned Rig early spring. Now, some people out there are groaning, oh, Debo, that's boring, that's dumb to fish. They don't even throw it. Well, hey, that's your loss. Because guess what? Year after year in cold water, in and around rocks, in and around wood, I catch a bunch of fish on this silly little thing. Now let's say in the northern, I don't know, 1/3 or 1/4 of the US, we don't have all that vegetation yet like you do in, late spring and summer. If you're already down south, you probably already got that. So I like to focus on what you commonly hear as staging areas. And for a lot of the places around here, these big main link points are going back into some of these lake arms. We have a lot of these rocky points or, kind of some of these channels that go back with these rocky points. And I can't think of a better way to kind of slow down and hit some of that where you're going to have fish sitting on the bottom of that, sitting around in that rocks than with a Ned Rig. Now I'm going to share a tip with you here because of the heads that I use. These work good in those rock piles, but you can also throw it, around docks. You don't have to worry about this getting hung up. Brush piles or, big wood or, falling down trees as those bass start to move up shallower in there in the spring. This is something that I use all year, so it's not like early spring and then I throw this away. This is something that works all year long. For a lot of people, it could be a finesse jig. Kind of takes the same spot for me. Recently, the last, 4 or 5 years maybe, Ned Rig has been it. And now the reason for me, I think because of the Ned Rig heads that I use, these EWG style, and people groan and say, well, the hookup ratio isn't as good, this and that. Listen, I can fish this, in the dirty stuff, in the rocks, and I don't have to worry about getting hung up all the flipping time, so I'm not changing different things out. This thing works absolutely great. These are some of the do-it ones. They have a mold that I make all of mine. If you want some like this, I would go over to Bass Dope Lures. I'll leave all the, the lures and stuff. You can get them on Tackle Warehouse. Of course, I'm partnered up with them. I'll leave all those links below. If you ever use those, a little bit does come back to me, so I appreciate anybody that uses that. Now, it's not 100% weedless and snagless proof. Just like any jig, anytime you get in those rocks and stuff, there is a chance that this can get snagged, but trying to go with as light a head as you can get away with and still feel the bottom is going to help. So not just automatically going to like, a half ounce or something crazy heavy. Now, if you're going to jump over on Tackle Warehouse, I think right now the best one out there is the Owner. I think they call it the Blockhead. I'll leave a link below, but it's got a long neck to it. That's the problem with a lot of these EWG Ned Rigs you find is they kind of skimp out on the hook, and this little, I call it the neck here, right behind the lead part of the head, is super, super short and tiny. So if you have any sort of regular plastic, they don't stay up there and they just pull all the way down. This is long enough, just like that Owner one, that it keeps them up there nice and tight. So I really like those. Also Flatlands, those were, I think, probably the first EWG hooks I ever used before I started making my own. They still make them. So plastics, I've been harping on these for a while. The X-Zone Nico Ned Zone. So it's a 4.25 inch plastic. I like it. It fits better on those EWGs, a little bit bigger profile to it. Can't ever go wrong with like a Yum Dinger, a little 4-inch Yum Dinger. They've also got like the Ned Dinger, which is 3 inches, maybe, I don't remember. This is one I've had a lot of success with lately too, is the Hellgrammite. Putting that on there looks great, especially you creek folks out there. So a tip for fishing these, like I just touched on a little bit ago, is don't fish these safe. With the EWG style heads, you can really get in and around that wood. You don't have to worry about getting snagged all the time. In and around those rocks, it comes through it all pretty darn well. So younger growing up, I would often fish, 2-3 feet away from a brush pile or try to go over the rocks too fast because I didn't want to get snagged. You've got to get in there where those fish are. Early spring, they're going to be moving more, so I don't think it's as much of an issue. But as you go into spring, especially into summer, they're going to be tight to that cover. So with the Ned Rig, if you're around some rocks and you see a log, don't be afraid to go right over that log with it. You're not going to snag too easily. So that's one big thing for me is don't fish safe. Get it right in there where you think those fish are going to be. Now for the setup for this baby, I do throw mine on a spinning rod, and I'm honestly just fishing this like a little finesse jig. I throw it out and I'm just hopping it, little hops and bounces. Sometimes I'll hop it more aggressive. Early spring when it's colder, it's going to be more of a real slow hop and kind of a drag. maybe that's why people don't like it, but to me it's not any different than fishing a jig, a downsized little jig. So I don't know, maybe it's a tough guy thing for some people, but hey, I'm comfortable with my Ned Rig ways. Now, this is the Intenza. I picked up an Intenza used over at American Legacy. They had a great deal on this. Said like excellent condition. It looks like it's been used twice. Got a great deal on this. Go check them out. I don't work with them or anything, but I do buy a lot of used gear there because they have really good prices. So the Intenza, Shimano Intenza rod. This is a 7-foot medium, extra fast, rated for lures 3/16 to 5/8. Now the reason I like a fast or an extra fast, so a little bit stiffer tip, is when I'm working on the rocks, and this is kind of one of what I find with everything, jig rods, Texas rigs. If I'm going to be around a bunch of rocks and I have to pull it over something, I don't want a super soft rod, because when you get like hung up in those rocks and stuff, you know, where you just kind of got to pull it a little bit, you know, harder to pop it over that. If you've got a real bendy rod, it like loads all the way up, and then like it finally comes over and you slingshot the bait underwater. I can just imagine that thing looks crazy. So with that faster tip, you can really get there and just kind of slow pop it and get it to kind of hop up and over it. So that's why I like a fast. This one I saw when it was an extra fast, I was like, ooh yeah, let's go with that. I think I only showed this in one video last year. I used it more than that, but one video at the end. The Shimano Vanford, this is the most expensive spinning reel I own, and I feel like it's more than I need. For spinning reel, really, as long as it's got a good smooth drag to it, you know, and decently smooth, it doesn't feel like a grinding cake, you know, mixer type deal. I don't need a whole lot. Spinning reels are simpler than baitcasters. You know, you don't have the brakes and all that to worry about. Some people will argue that. I get it. But for me, I feel like that $100 for a spinning reel, I don't really need any more than that. This is twice that, I think like $220, something like that. The line, I've got some 15-pound P-line Endurix braid. It's the no fade, and it is, after testing, completely no fade. That's been used for a few months and looks brand new. So that stuff's pretty cool. 15-pound braid, then I go to a 10-pound leader. If I'm out around a bunch of rocks and wood and stuff, as long as I've got, I'm not trying to go too light with the Ned Rig, you can even bump up to 12-pound leaders. So 15-pound braid to a 10-pound leader on there. And yes, I did have the dreaded drop shot I was throwing. I didn't put that video on. I was too embarrassed. I was catching fish on it. Okay, lure number 2, getting back to my roots this year, we're going with a spinnerbait. One of my very first ever confidence baits. And this is a tough one because this kind of single hook moving bait, it could be a chatterbait early spring, it could be a spinnerbait, it could be one of these underspins, also one of my top performers. But I'm making a conscious decision to go with the spinnerbait more this year because forever it used to be like I could take a spinnerbait anywhere and catch fish, and slowly got off it, slowly started getting replaced by, you know, these things, the old bladed jig, chatterbait, and all this other stuff that comes out. So, and I've got a video planned because I want to get into them more. I'm going to kind of do a full-blown when, where, how, all the different breakdown of spinnerbaits, different blades, colors, all that stuff. I'm going to go really in-depth coming up soon. So if you like spinners or you want to get better out of them, hopefully that'll help. Now, as I said, for the Ned Rig, early spring here, we don't have all that grass. And when you get a bunch of that grass and slimy stuff, the spinner blades tend to just collect that. And then you get it around the swivels, it's a pain in the butt. So once you get a bunch of that vegetation and stuff, it can be pretty iffy. In a spinner, I kind of put it away. You know, something like a swim jig or a chatterbait works better. But early spring, we don't have that. And we've got bass moving. So with a search lure, moving bass, covering water, Now, the past couple of years, I think probably my favorite is the new Finesse Covert series from Booyah. So the Booyah Covert's been around a while, like these, the larger series. The big difference with it is, though, do I have another one? Let me crack this open. The difference is the profile. These are both a 1/2 ounce spinnerbait. And looking at these, you're like, wow, that one's way bigger. Well, the weight on the regular Covert for the 1/2 ounce is all up in front on the head. With the Covert Finesse, they've taken some of that lead weight and pushed it back onto the shank as part of the keeper. So both 1/2 ounce, one definitely looks bigger. This also has a bigger skirt. So it's just a little bit different profile because early spring, you're going to have a lot of fronts coming through, rain, wind. You're going to have usually dirtied up, muddier water. And going with a Colorado blade or even like a really big Colorado blade, you could switch this out with a lot of thump is what a lot of guys go to. But so this turtleback blade, I think these are actually called Oklahoma blades. If I remember right, I've always called them like the little turtleback blade, this kind of shape to it, with a little Colorado blade on there. And this is the bone color that they do. Also staples that I've thrown forever, the War Eagles. Again, they've got the Finesse, like a smaller 5/16. They've got the other, you know, larger blades. Throwing these a lot last year from first gen. They've got some awesome colors like that white and purple one. Oh, baby. And they've got the half painted blade, which is pretty neat. So half painted, half flashy. And then what I would say is probably the best bang for the buck spinnerbait on the market. I think these are still at $7. I don't know if they've gone up. I need to check, but 5/16, they've got these finesse, the tour grade. What is the exact name? Tour grade spinnerbait. That's the 5/16 finesse. Again, in that turtleback. $7. It's got good components on it. It's got a wire tied skirt to it. So I think Strike King did a really good job on that one. Some neat colors. Look at the glittery head on that one. Now my early spring tip for these is don't be afraid to go heavier. So with those 5/16s, 3/8, 3/8 is usually what I start with because I'm target casting, right? In early spring though, I like to go a little bit deeper. Now I'm not a super deep, like, 15, 20 foot spinnerbait guy. There's a lot of guys that do that in slow roll up, but I'm talking like a lot of the places 10 foot around here. When there's a big rocky bank like this, I'm throwing it way up and banging the rocks, knocking it all the way down until I get to that little flat spot. A lot of times that's right where those fish are. So I'm kind of bouncing it and keeping contact as I'm going. So in the spring, especially with the wind, these can kind of be like a kite to throw. Sometimes they kind of flop in the air. They can be tough. Going up to a little bit heavier. So a 1/2 ounce or even 3/4 works a lot better in the spring. You can throw it out there easier. You can let it hit and just kind of keep your rod tip up as it's banging and bouncing off that stuff. Now the combo, people are probably going to tell you different here, but I don't think you need or want an expensive combo most of the time for spinnerbaits. I want that fish to get that spinnerbait in its mouth and my rod to start to load up, and then I pull into it and set that hook, because with, a spinnerbait, there's blades, a bunch of different things on it. I want to make sure that fish has it. So for example, right here, Shimano SLX rod, $99 rod. This is a 7.2 medium heavy, extra fast, 1/4 ounce to 3/4. I think they have a medium fast that's just a regular fast. I don't remember for sure. I picked this one up and I was actually using it for a Texas rig rod. That's what I was initially using it as, the extra fast again, like I was talking. But a lot of these, like for example, if you go mono on here, which is what I've got on it, that kind of gives me that stretch and that delay in the line. When the fish has it, that mono starts to stretch and then I can pull into it with the rod. So you can always kind of tinker with your gear to get what you want. Again, same thing with reel. You don't need to go anything crazy. This is the SLX XT. Think like $120 reel. A line on there, I've got some P-line copolymer. I know I said mono, but I think it's it's actually the Topwater on this one, because I was throwing a bigger spook with it too, the 15-pound Topwater. But again, you could go mono, big game, something like that gives you that stretch. So I don't think you need to go crazy expensive for your spinnerbaits, 7 foot or even a 6-foot Tim, because oftentimes you're you're target casting. So make good, accurate presentations. Okay, lure number 3 is one that I've always got to have on. I don't care what spring it is. This is one that always produces for me. It seems like I always have a day where I catch like 30, 40 fish, when you find them schooled up. And that is with a jerkbait. Specifically a suspending jerkbait, again, on those rocky points and drop-offs, those spots where, you might have a riverbed or something come through and it comes up to a real quick transition. Those fish are able to feed easier from deeper water and kind of go straight up. But anyway, that is a perfect way to attack them, is with a suspending jerkbait. And it's just, I've said it before, it's one of those lures, that pop, 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 pause. And with the suspending jerkbait, they just sit there just waiting, teasing the fish, nose down until bam, they have to eat it. And this is one of my favorites, getting into the types and such. This one from last year was my favorite that I used, the Rapala Maverick. Absolutely love these. There's a number of really good colors in them. Seems to be a rather shallow diver though. I forget what they say, like maybe to 6 feet. I want to say mine was maybe like in that 4-ish foot, maybe down to 5. I think I was throwing it on 12 pound most of the time. So, if I drop down to 10 or 8, I think I was even throwing it on 10, but you could drop down to 8 and get it a little deeper. The Berkley Stunna is another one that I've really, really liked. And this one's a little bit different because it's a slow sinking. And so if you're above some fish a little bit deeper, again, on one of those, drop-offs or ledges, or, a little roadbed or a little creek channel or something, this one's nice because you can get it to right where you think they are and you can let it kind of suspend and then slowly drop down to them. So if you have a jerkbait like that Maverick, it's only getting to 4 feet, you can get this closer to that 6-foot range and let it sink. Or you could just go to a deeper diving lipless, something that has a bigger lip on it. This is a Lucky Craft. The pointers are excellent jerkbaits. The Mega Bass Vision 110 is one that I need to put more work in with. I know everybody kind of gets upset with me because I say, I think they're a little overrated for the price. People are like, well, that was the first one, that was the best one. I get it. They're amazing lures. It's just for the price, $25, that's hard for me to swallow. But with the prices now, getting these JDM, you can get them for like 10, 11 bucks. And then the 6th Sense Provoke in that 4K shad, or this one, I forget which color this is. I'll link these all below. The types and the colors I like, just to give you a couple suggestions. But really with jerkbaits, the clearer the water, I go with a more translucent color. If the water is stained up a little bit, I'll go to an opaque. Or if it's low light, so if it's really cloudy or early in the morning, I'll go with that, that straight opaque color, a hard color that's not see-through. And then if you've got sun out, something with some flash like a chrome or that gold around here does really well. Something with some flash on it. Okay, so my tip for the jerkbait is really the cadence. And I know this sounds like, oh, Debo, come on, we've heard this a million times. But it really, really is. For me, normally it's going to be a pop, pop, pause, and then pop. So I go the 2, pause, and then 1 more. Colder the water is, the longer I let it pause. And I'm not going to pop it as hard. So, in colder, moderate water, it might be a pop, pop. Let it sit. I might let it sit 5, 10, 15 seconds. Pop, pop, a slower. Whereas as it warms up later in the spring, post-spawn, those fish are stacked up on points feeding. It might be a pop, pop, pop. Let it sit. 2, 3, pop, pop, pop. So changing that cadence and then changing how many times you pop it and everything in there. So I know it sounds kind of crazy, but the number of pops, how fast you're going, how much that delay is. But usually colder water, I'm not going to be as aggressive with the pops. I'm going to slow down a little bit. As the water warms up, the fish get more aggressive. The water temperatures do that to them. They're cold-blooded animals. So try to find what suits your area best and try to find a cadence that works for you, but generally slower to a little bit faster with harder pops as the water gets warmer. Now my setup for this baby, again, this is not a cheap one either. So when I went up and fished with the guys up at Thunderhawk, they were nice enough to give me one of their Tyco rods, and this thing is absolutely fantastic. It is crazy light. These are like $260 rods, something like that. The big thing though, this is a 6'7" medium power, fast action, rated for lures 1/4 to 5/8. Now, being someone that bank fished for so long, I like a shorter rod for this. Any sort of topwater or jerkbait, anything where I have to work that rod tipped down like this, I want something short. When you're walking the banks, you're hitting rocks, you're hitting wood, you're hitting weeds, all that stuff in front of you. And I've noticed the same from the kayak. I don't want a big, huge, long handle rod if I'm having to work it and move it around a bunch. I do look for that, a little bbit shorter of a butt on my jerkbait rod, shorter rod overall. I would say 6'10" is like the longest that I like. If you stand up fishing on a boat, you can easily do, a 7-footer. I don't know much longer than that, but like a 7-footer is great if you're standing on a boat. But for bank fishing and from the kayak, I do like a slightly shorter butt. Don't have to go this expensive. Again, I was gifted this from the Thunderhawk guys. It's a gorgeous rod. Their Tyco series. Go check those out. Reel though. The reel, I do like to have something that throws lighter bait. So like, for example, this is that Stunna 100. There's different sizes of jerk baits. This is the smaller size. The Mega Bass Vision 110 does come in the 110 size, and then a junior size that's a little bit smaller. For spring, I do like to mess with the smaller ones just a little bit. So that's another thing. I'll leave sizes and all that down below. But anyway, for the reel, I like to have a reel that throws light things. And I think for the money, probably the best, like, do it all kind of lighter lure reel is the Shimano SLX MGL 70. It's small in hand. You can hold this thing comfortably in hand all day and work it. It's not going to fatigue you. Throws light baits really well. I've got 10-pound line on this. Does spectacular. I absolutely love this reel. Kind of a dark horse reel that I don't think people talk about enough. I think people just jump to the Corrado, but this one, I have been so dang happy with this reel. So yeah, the line, 10-pound fluorocarbon. This is P-Line Tactical, probably my favorite all-around fluorocarbon, but 10-pound does really well for the jerk baits. Okay, the fourth and final lure. Remember how I said fish are going to be moving. They're going to be moving from those deeper spots, to those points and such. Probably not a much better way to cover tons and tons of water than with one of these. We're talking a lipless crankbait. These things, you can cast them a daggum mile. A 1/2 ounce lipless like this. Last year, I even moved up to a 3/4 ounce just because it would get so windy out there. You can throw a 3/4 ounce straight into the wind. Doesn't matter at all. You might have to reel it a little bit faster, but one thing I've noticed with these, because they have such a tight wiggle, hear that? That's a Booyah one knocker. It's just got like one tungsten ball. They wiggle real tight like that. So it's not like a deep, crazy crankbait. They wiggle real tight like this in the water. Perfect for those spring fish that they're not looking for that insane erratic action. Just a real tight, swim through there. So with these, you can cover water. You can yo-yo them on points. So instead of, like, let's say you don't have a jerkbait, you can throw them out on those points, or, kind of get parallel to that point, sideways to it, throw it out as it's shallow, yo-yo it and let it kind of fall down, and then yo-yo it, bring it up, yo-yo it. So kind of the same as a jerkbait deal. So they're actually really versatile, and a lot of folks write these off in the spring because they say, well, you know, most of my lakes are grass, you can't do it. It might still have dead vegetation, depending on your lake. You know, if you're south, you might not get rid of all of it even, but up here, a lot of that stuff is going to die off and you're not going to have the crazy grass choke lakes in the beginning of the year like you will later. So you can get away with throwing something like this, the double treble hooks, when, you know, later on in the summer, it's just not even possible. So as far as the brands, one thing you want to pay attention to is what the nose of it looks like, which is what I call, which would kind of be the lip, but they're lipless. So it's like the nose of the body, I guess you'd call it. How wide this is. So this is a Booyah One Knocker, or the Booyah Hard Knocker. It has like BBs in it. It's got this kind of decently wide nose. And to me, this isn't too crazy. You can do both with this. You can jig it. But the bigger that nose is, the better it's going to come up and over cover. It's meant for usually a little bit shallower situations. Something like this for the money. This is a Cotton Cordell Super Spot. For the money, you can see it's a little bit larger profile. Big wide nose on it. This is probably for the money the best like shallow burning crankbait. You know, they're only what, $3-4 bucks. I don't even know what they cost now. Relatively cheap compared to a lot of these other, you know, Lucky Craft LV 500s, what, 16 bucks, something like that. So something like this, really, really shallow, especially as spring keeps going on, you can just burn these things up shallow and you can get on some crazy fun bites. But this is probably my best do-it-all one right here. Another perfect do-it-all. And in the red color, yes, red in the spring is absolutely a thing. The Bill Lewis. Okay, this is probably the best do-it-all out there. The rattle trap. They call, you know, all liplesses. Some people call all liplesses a rattle trap for a reason, because of that guy right there, the Bill Lewis. So that's a great do-it-all. You can yo-yo it. You can burn it shallow. The Red-Eye Shad, Strike King Red-Eyed Shad is another excellent one. Again, a little bit bigger nose, so more of that burning, a little bit better around cover to come up and over stuff. The new Berkeley Jack, I absolutely love that thing for yo-yoing. It's a little bit heavier overall, but it's got a real small nose to it. I don't know why I had one. There it is. I found it. See the nose on this one, and this doesn't even do it justice because it comes to like a point up here. That's all the higher, or that's all the bigger the point is when you go to the highest point. And as a yo-yoing lipless, that's what you want, is something thin up there so it cuts through the water easier, comes back down. So they've got a few different sizes of these. I don't know if you can read that there. That's the Jack 6, which comes in at a 1/2 ounce. So it's a good little small profile, but a really, really cool one. Look at that color there. Puts off a lot of vibration. Neat little lipless. But that's more of your yo-yoing type, like the, you know, to fish on the bottom, the LV 500s. I don't get into that as much. I fish more shallow with them, you know, 8-10 foot and below. Another one worth mentioning is the Thunderhawk Sergeant. This one's cool because it's got the rotating hook hangers on bottom, and the 1/2 ounce version, this S, is silent. As far as the colors go, basically the same thing as the lipless. You know, an opaque, solid color and lower light, a little bit more stain to the water. If you've got some sunlight, a chrome or a gold does well. The clearer the water is, I go to a more translucent color. So I don't overthink it too much. But one thing to throw in, like I said, is that red. Springtime in red, I didn't fall into this, you know, whole thing for a long, long time. Held out. And there was finally a day Randizzle and I were out. I was joking like, oh, I'm going to throw a red lipless because I just didn't believe it. Finally threw it, and we caught a crap ton of fish that day, both of us throwing red. So ever since then, I don't know, what, 7-8 years ago, I've been a firm believer in the red lipless in the spring. You can throw it all year, but I tend to go to other colors later. The tips for the lipless is experiment with weight and experiment with your retrieves. So weights, if you are fishing a small pond and you have trouble keeping it up over grass and such, drop down to a little 1/4 ounce. It's not going to fall down as fast. Or if you're, you know, fishing shallower, 1/4 ounce is easier to keep up higher as you're reeling it through there. Starting out in the spring, you know, I'm just kind of going to a consistent, and I might pop it in there. If I'm fishing over some of these spots, you know, over grass or over some of these drop-offs, sometimes I'll throw in that yo-yo and let it fall, and it's got like just this little quiver, and then pop it. It does a real quick vibration and then kind of falls. So mess with that in there. Again, finding those mud lines. As the wind and everything's blowing in from the rain and everything stirring up the water, you will have hard mud lines. So you can look, you know, on the wind-blown side. So usually I'm fishing with casting the lipless into the wind, you know, so I'm fishing this wind-blown side over here. You can see, you know, spots in the water maybe 10 feet out, 20 foot out, a hard line of mud. And fishing right on the edge of that mud, fish will use that mud line just like they would vegetation or wood. They'll sit in that dirty stuff and wait for little bait fish to come by and zip out and get them. So fish those mud lines, vary your retrieves, and try different sizes. Okay, last, the combo. Again, a little bit of a more bougie combo, but this was one that I wanted to get and try because Cashin has an icon that is the rattle trap rod, so specifically made for lipless crankbaits. Again, I don't think you need to go this expensive. You can find a lot of good $100 rods, $120 rods, $50 rods that will do this, because I'm not looking for like an extra crisp, super fast rod, but I don't want a really super soft, noodly crankbait rod. I want something in between, because if I'm fishing a 1/2 ounce lipless like this Booyah, I want to be able to cast it out there and pop it. So I want a decent backbone, like a stronger medium to a lighter medium heavy with a decent, like fastish to moderate fast tip. What I don't want is a crankbait rod that's going to bend all the way down here, because then when you rip it and pop it, your bait might only be moving like this because your rod is bending so much. That makes sense. Your rod has to bend all the way over, so your bait might only be moving just a little bit. Same thing if you go too stiff. It is a treble hook lure. I do want some give in the rod, so like a medium to medium heavy, moderate-ish fast. So for example, on this one, it's a 7'5" for those long casts. It's a moderate fast, medium heavy, rated for lures 3/8 up to 1 1/4 ounce. So if I was throwing like the smaller 1/4 ounce lipless, that's all you throw, I would probably drop down to like a medium power, moderate fast. But for the 1/2 ounce and 3/4, this thing is perfect for it. And it's just that, it's got a good bendy tip to it, but it's got a good backbone set in it. I'm fishing 15-pound P-Line Tactical, so I'm fishing fluorocarb on here. The reel, again, it's overkill, but my favorite reel ever right now, the Daiwa Zillion. Throw on some sexy Gamexus handles there. This thing is an absolute delight to fish all day. And yes, I do fish both left and right-handed reels, if you're wondering. I fish both. All right, fishing friends, comment below and let me know, what are your favorite 4 early spring lures? I mean, there's a bunch that could be in there. We're talking blade baits, spy baits some people are getting out already, chatter baits. Listen, there's a whole list. There's not one right way to do it. So this is just my list. Leave your tips and comments below to help others out. I always appreciate that. Now, today's subscribe fishing friend is my guy, Brian Lee. Brian has been around a long time subscriber, always comments, helps the channel. I appreciate that, brother. He said, thanks for the review. This was on the Cashin rods. Nice looking rods, good price point. Looking for a new spinning rod to replace the one I broke. I appreciate people leaving comments and stuff like that. It really does help out the channel. Again, I could not do this if it was not from all of you watching, supporting, everything that you do to help support the channel. It means a ton to me. So hope you enjoy. I need to edit. Thanks. Love y'all. Till next time.